Admiral Dae-ho Kim looked out of the transport ship's window at the massive space station floating in the darkness. Nexus Prime was the biggest artificial structure he had ever seen. It was built by 12 different alien races working together, and it showed. The station had metal walls that curved like waves, crystal towers that caught starlight, and docking bays that looked like giant flowers opening to space. "First time seeing it?" asked Ambassador So-Young Park as she joined him at the window. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and gray hair pulled back in a tight knot. She had spent 20 years talking to aliens, learning their languages and customs. "Yes," Dae-ho said. "It's bigger than I thought it would be." "Wait until you see the inside," said General Woo Jin Lee from behind them. He was a big man with scars on his hands and face. The scars came from the Battle of Kepler 442, where human ships had fought Vorthak warships for 3 days straight. All those different alien species trying to build something together. It's a miracle the place doesn't fall apart. Their ship moved slowly toward one of the docking bays. Dae-ho could see other ships already there. The Vorthak ships looked like giant spiders made of black metal. The Zalani ships were smooth and silver like eggs. The Marathi ships had strange symbols carved into their hulls that seemed to move when you looked at them. "Remember," So-Young said quietly, "we're here to make peace. The war has gone on for 3 years. Millions of people are dead. We need to end this." Dae-ho nodded, but his jaw was tight. He remembered the reports from New Seoul. 2,300,000 people killed in one day. The Vorthak had used biological weapons that turned the air itself into poison. Children, old people, families just trying to live their lives. All dead because the Vorthak said humans were expanding too fast into space. The ship docked with a soft bump. Air pumps started working to make sure the atmosphere was safe for humans. Dae-ho checked his uniform one more time. The blue and gold colors of the Terran Federation looked bright under the station's lights. They walked through the airlock into Nexus Prime. The corridor was wide enough for 20 people to walk side by side. The walls were covered with writing, in dozens of different languages. Some of the words glowed. Others seemed to be carved by claws or tentacles. The air smelled like flowers and metal and something else Dae-ho couldn't name. "The Galactic Council chamber is this way," So-Young said, leading them down a corridor that curved gently to the left. They passed other beings walking in the opposite direction. A group of tall, thin aliens with blue skin and 4 arms. A creature that looked like a walking tree with flowers for a head. 2 beings covered in fur who talked to each other in musical sounds. "How many species are part of the council?" Woo Jin asked. 12, So-Young replied. "The Vorthak, the Zalani, the Marathi, the Hegemony, and 8 others. We would be the 13th if we can make peace." They reached a large door made of some kind of crystal that let light through but not images. Guards stood on both sides. One was clearly Zalani, with silver skin and large black eyes. The other was from a species Dae-ho didn't recognize. It had scales and multiple eyes arranged around its head. "Terran Federation delegation," So-Young said, showing her identification. The crystal door dissolved like water, letting them pass through. The chamber beyond was enormous. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into shadows. Seats were arranged in a circle around a central platform. Each group of seats was different, built for the body shape of different species. The human seats were simple and practical. The Vorthak area looked like a nest made of black metal spikes. The Zalani section was all curves and flowing lines. The Marathi seats seemed to shift and change color as they watched. Other delegations were already there. Dae-ho could see the Vorthak group across the circle. They were about the same size as humans but covered in hard, dark plates like armor. Their leader, Supreme Warcast Thekmor, was bigger than the others. His plates had red markings that Dae-ho knew meant high rank among their people. Thekmor was looking directly at the human delegation. His face had no expression that humans could read, but his body language was clear enough. He sat straight and still, like a predator watching prey. "He doesn't look happy to see us," Woo Jin muttered. "He's not," So-Young said. "The Vorthak think we're too young as a species to deserve respect. They call us soft flesh because we don't have natural armor like they do. A sound like singing filled the chamber. It came from the Marathi section. Their species communicated partly through music, and this was their way of calling the meeting to order. "Beings of the Galactic Council," a voice said through the translation system. It came from the Zalani elder who served as the current council leader. "We gather today to discuss ending the war between the Terran Federation and the Vorthak Empire. 3 years of fighting have damaged trade routes and cost millions of lives. It is time for peace." So Young stood up. The chamber grew quiet. "Honored council members," she began. "Humanity comes here seeking justice and peace. We did not start this war. Our colonies were attacked without warning. Our people were killed with weapons banned by galactic law. We want acknowledgement of these crimes and promise that they will not happen again." She activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. Images appeared showing the attack on New Sol, burned buildings, bodies in the streets, hospitals full of children dying from poison gas. "This is what the Vorthak did to our people," So Young said. Her voice was steady, but Daeho could hear the anger underneath. "We have evidence of 12 separate war crimes, use of biological weapons against civilians, attacks on medical facilities, execution of prisoners." The chamber was silent. Even the Marathi stopped their musical communication. The evidence was clear and horrible. Thekmor stood up slowly. His voice came through the translators as a deep growl. "The soft flesh lies. They entered sacred Vorthak territory without permission. They built colonies on worlds that belonged to us for 1,000 years. We defended what was ours. Those worlds had no Vorthak colonies," So Young replied. "They were empty systems. Humanity followed all galactic exploration laws. Laws made by species too weak to claim territory properly," Thekmor said. His plates flared out from his body, a sign of aggression. "The Vorthak do not recognize the authority of beings who have never truly fought for survival." Daeho felt his hands tighten into fists. Wu Jin put a warning hand on his arm. They were here to make peace, not start another fight. But looking at Thekmor's arrogant stance and remembering the images of dead children, Daeho wondered if peace was really possible. Some wounds were too deep to heal with words. 6 days of talking had worn everyone down. Ambassador So Young Park felt tired in her bones. She had presented evidence, made arguments, and tried every diplomatic trick she knew. The other council members listened politely, but she could see doubt in their eyes. The problem was simple. The Vorthak refused to admit they had done anything wrong. Every time So Young showed proof of war crimes, Thekmor had an excuse. The biological weapons were pest control for worlds, they claimed. The attacks on hospitals were military necessity, because humans hid soldiers there. The execution of prisoners was preventing escape attempts. "They're lying through their teeth," General Wu Jin Lee whispered during a break in the talks. "Everyone knows it, but nobody wants to say so." Admiral Daeho Kim nodded. "The other species are afraid of the Vorthak. They've been the strongest military power in this part of the galaxy for centuries." So Young looked around the chamber during the break. The Zalani delegation was talking quietly among themselves, their large black eyes showing worry. The Marathi were making soft musical sounds that their translators said meant concern and uncertainty. The hegemony representatives were probably calculating how much money they would lose if the war continued. None of them wanted to take sides. They all hoped the humans and Vorthak would just agree to stop fighting and go away. "Maybe we should consider compromise," So Young said, though the words tasted bitter in her mouth. "Half the disputed systems, limited reparations, something to end the killing." "What about New Sol?" Daeho asked. "What about all our people who died? Do we just forget them?" "Sometimes forgetting is the price of peace," So Young said. She had been a diplomat long enough to know that perfect justice was rare. Usually you had to settle for stopping the bleeding. The session resumed. Thekmor stood at his delegation section, his dark plates catching the chamber's lights. He looked like a statue made of black metal and anger. "The Vorthak Empire has prepared our final offer," he announced. His voice carried easily through the vast chamber. We will cease all military action against the soft flesh. In return, they will withdraw from all disputed systems and acknowledge Vorthak's superiority in matters of space warfare. So Young felt, her heart sink. It was worse than she had expected. What about reparations for the civilians killed on our worlds? The Vorthak do not pay tribute to lesser species. What about guarantees that chemical weapons will not be used again? The Vorthak will use whatever tools are necessary to defend our territory. What about recognition that war crimes were committed? Thekmor's plates flared wide, a clear sign of aggression. The Vorthak recognize no crimes. We recognize only strength and weakness. You are weak. The chamber fell silent. So Young could hear her own heartbeat. Around the circle, other delegations shifted uncomfortably. They had all expected the Vorthak to offer something, even if it wasn't much. So Young stood up slowly. Her legs felt shaky, but her voice was firm. Ambassador Thekmor, the Terran Federation cannot accept these terms. We came here seeking peace, through justice. We will not dishonor our dead by accepting terms that make their killers into heroes. Then you are fools, Thekmor said. Fools who will join your dead very soon. The threat was clear and open. Other council members began talking, urgently among themselves. The Zelani elder called for order, but his voice sounded worried. The session is adjourned, the elder announced. All delegations will return tomorrow for final discussions. As beings began leaving their seats, So Young gathered her papers. Her hands were shaking slightly. She had known the talks might fail, but she had hoped for better. Ambassador Park, a voice said behind her. She turned to see Thekmor approaching. His delegation followed him like a pack of hunting animals. Yes, she said, trying to keep her voice level. Thekmor moved closer, too close. So Young could smell something like burning metal coming from his body. You spoke of honoring your dead. Soon you will have many more dead to honor. Is that another threat? Admiral Kim asked, stepping up beside So Young. It is a promise, Thekmor said. His plates were fully flared now, making him look twice as wide as a human. The Vorthak do not make empty threats, soft flesh. General Lee moved to So Young's other side. Neither do humans, he said quietly. For a moment, the two groups faced each other in the slowly emptying chamber. Tension crackled between them like electricity. Other delegates hurried past, not wanting to get involved in whatever was happening. Then, Thekmor made a sound that might have been laughter. Brave words from such small creatures. We shall see how brave you are when your worlds burn. He turned and walked away, his delegation following. So Young watched them go, a cold feeling growing in her stomach. That didn't sound like normal diplomatic threats, Wu Jin said. No, So Young agreed. It sounded personal. They made their way back to the human quarters on the station. The corridors seemed longer than before, and So Young found herself looking over her shoulder. The feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. Their rooms were in a section designed for human comfort. Normal gravity, familiar air, walls painted in colors that reminded them of Earth. So Young sat at her desk and began writing her report to Earth. Peace talks failing, she typed. Vorthak refuse all compromise. Recommend preparing for resumed hostilities. She stopped typing and stared at the words. 3 years of war, and it was about to start again. More ships destroyed, more worlds attacked, more families torn apart. A soft sound made her look up. Admiral Kim was standing in her doorway, his face grim. The station security chief wants to see us, he said. There's been a development. They met in a small conference room near the station's central core. The security chief was a hegemony member, a being that looked like a cross between an octopus and a tree. Its translator made its voice sound like wind through leaves. We have detected unusual energy signatures from the Vorthak quarters, it said. Our sensors cannot penetrate their privacy shields, but the readings suggest they are modifying equipment. What kind of modifications? So Young asked. Unknown. But the energy patterns match those used in Vorthak combat implants. So Young felt the cold feeling in her stomach get worse. Combat implants, those are illegal on neutral stations. Yes, However, the Vorthak delegation claims diplomatic immunity. We cannot search their quarters without causing a major incident. So, we just wait and see what they're planning? General Lee asked. We will increase security around all delegations, the security chief said. But our options are limited. They returned to their quarters with a security escort. So Young tried to finish her report, but she couldn't concentrate. Every small sound made her jump. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. She was still awake when the attack came. It started with the lights going out. Emergency power kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red light. Alarms began sounding throughout the station. So Young's door burst open. Not the normal sliding motion, but an explosion that sent metal fragments flying across her room. 3 Vorthak warriors stood in the wreckage, their bodies crackling with energy from hidden weapons. Diplomacy is over, soft flesh, one of them said. Now you learn what happens to those who defy the Vorthak Empire. So Young reached for her emergency communicator, but she was too slow. The plasma blast hit her in the chest, and everything went white, then black. General Wu Jin Lee was dreaming of his daughter when the alarm started screaming. In the dream, little Yeonseo was 5 years old again, running through the garden behind their house on Earth. She was laughing as she chased a butterfly, her small hands reaching for something beautiful and free. The alarms tore him away from that peaceful memory. Red emergency lights were flashing in his room. The station's computer was announcing something about a security breach in a voice too calm for the situation. Wu Jin rolled out of bed and grabbed his sidearm from the nightstand. Years of military training had taught him to be ready for trouble. In seconds, he pressed his ear to the door and listened. Voices in the corridor, speaking Vorthak, but that was impossible. The Vorthak quarters were 3 levels away from the human section. A scream echoed through the walls. Human scream. Female voice. So Young. Wu Jin whispered. He opened his door carefully and looked out. The corridor was empty, but he could see blast marks on the walls. Someone had been fighting here. Someone with energy weapons. He moved toward Ambassador Park's room, staying close to the wall. His bare feet made no sound on the metal floor. Another scream came from ahead, cut off suddenly. So Young's door was gone. Not opened, not broken, but completely destroyed. Pieces of metal were scattered across the floor like deadly confetti. Wu Jin could smell burning plastic and something else. Something that reminded him of cooked meat. He found her body in the wreckage of her room. The plasma blast had hit her center mass. She had died instantly, which was the only mercy in the situation. Her hand was still reaching for her communicator. Damn it, Wu Jin whispered. So Young had been a good woman. She had spent her life trying to build bridges between species, and they had killed her for it. An explosion echoed from another part of the human quarters. Admiral Kim's room. Wu Jin ran down the corridor, no longer trying to be quiet. Speed mattered more than stealth now. He reached Kim's section just as 3 Vorthak warriors came out of the Admiral's room. Their body armor was crackling with energy fields. Combat implants, just like the security chief had warned. One of the Vorthak saw him and raised its weapon. Wu Jin was faster. His sidearm was designed for ship combat, powerful enough to punch through bulkheads. The energy bolt caught the Vorthak in the head and sent it flying backward. The other 2 opened fire. Wu Jin dove behind a support pillar as plasma bolts scorched the air where he had been standing. The metal pillar was getting hot from the impacts. He leaned around the pillar and fired twice more. One shot missed, but the other caught a Vorthak in the chest. Its armor held, but the impact knocked it down. The 3rd Vorthak rushed him, moving faster than any being that size should be able to move. Combat implants made them stronger and quicker than nature intended. Wu Jin tried to bring his weapon around, but the alien was too close. A monomolecular blade extended from the Vorthak's wrist. The edge was only 1 molecule thick, sharp enough to cut through almost anything. It swept toward Wu Jin's neck. He threw himself backward, but not fast enough. The blade caught him across the throat, cutting deep. Blood started flowing down his chest. The wound was bad, but not immediately fatal. The alien had missed the major arteries by centimeters. Wu Jin fell to the floor, gasping. The Vorthak stood over him. preparing for a killing blow. Its translator made its voice sound like grinding metal. Die well, soft flesh, you fought better than expected. Go to hell, Wu Jin managed to say. He still had his sidearm. The Vorthak had forgotten about it, focused on the dramatic moment of victory. Wu Jin brought the weapon up and fired point blank into the alien's face. The blast knocked the Vorthak backward into the wall. Its head was gone, replaced by smoking ruin. Wu Jin tried to get up but fell back down. He was losing too much blood. With shaking hands, he activated his emergency communicator. The device was designed to punch through any interference and reach the human fleet waiting outside the station. "This is General Lee," he said, his voice weak but clear. "The peace talks have failed. Ambassador Park is dead. Admiral Kim is dead. The Vorthak have attacked under a flag of truce. Diplomacy is dead." He coughed and blood came up. The wound was worse than he had thought. "Remember them all," he whispered into the communicator. "Remember what they did here. Show them what happens when they murder hope." The device transmitted his final words across space, carried by quantum signals that moved faster than light itself. In less than an hour, his message would reach Earth and every human colony in known space. Wu Jin closed his eyes and thought of his daughter again. She would be grown now, probably with children of her own. He hoped she would understand why. He had died so far from home. The station's security forces found him 20 minutes later, still alive but barely. They rushed him to the medical bay, but it was too late. General Wu Jin Lee died as they were trying to save him, his last thoughts of butterflies and laughter, and a little girl running through a garden on a world that suddenly seemed very far away. News of the massacre reached Earth within hours. President Hye-jin Choi was in her office when the message arrived. She read it 3 times before the words really sank in. So Young Park had been her friend since college. They had studied together, argued about politics, shared dreams of a better future for humanity. Now she was dead, killed by the same aliens they had been trying to make peace with. Admiral Kim had been a hero of the first Vorthak attacks. He had saved thousands of lives at the Battle of Kepler 442. Now he was dead too. General Lee had been a good soldier and a loving father. Dead. The president of the Terran Federation walked to her window and looked out at the city below. Millions of people going about their lives, not yet knowing that everything had changed. In a few hours she would have to tell them that peace had failed, that their diplomats had been murdered, that the war would continue. But first she had to make a decision that would echo through history. She pressed a button on her desk. "Get me the Joint Chiefs of Staff, emergency session, and contact the colonial governors. I want every human world to hear this directly from me." Her aide looked confused. "What should I tell them the meeting is about?" President Choi looked back out the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky red. It seemed appropriate. "Tell them we're going to war," she said quietly. "And this time we're not just fighting to defend ourselves. We're fighting to make sure this never happens again." Within hours, the message was spreading across human space. Not just the news of the murders, but something else. Something that had been building in the human heart for 3 years of war and loss and disappointment. The Vorthak had wanted to see human fury. They had killed hope itself and expected humanity to bow down, in fear. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Captain Ji-Eun Kang had never seen anything like it. The New Horizon had been a peaceful exploration ship just 2 weeks ago. Her crew had been scientists and diplomats, people who studied alien cultures and looked for new worlds to settle. Now, her ship was covered in weapons. "Captain," her engineering officer called out, "the new plasma cannons are online. We're reading full power to all weapon systems." Ji-Eun nodded, still trying to get used to the idea. The New Horizon had been designed to make friends with aliens, not kill them. But the galaxy had changed. Humanity had changed. She looked at the datapad in her hands. Orders from Fleet Command. The ship that had once carried ambassadors and scientists now carried Marines and enough firepower to destroy a small moon. "Any word from the other ships in our group?" she asked. All converted and ready, Captain. The Peacemaker, the Friendship, the Open Hand. Funny how the names sound different now. Ji-un understood what he meant. Ships named for peace and friendship had become instruments of war. It said something about what humanity had become in the weeks since the massacre at Nexus Prime. She walked to the main view screen and looked out at the fleet gathering around them. Hundreds of ships, maybe thousands. Some had been military vessels, but many were like hers. Civilian ships turned into warships by a species that had finally lost its patience. Captain, the communications officer said, Fleet Admiral Tae-young. Bay is requesting a conference with all ship commanders. Put him through. The view screen changed to show a man with gray hair and tired eyes. Admiral Bay had been planning retirement before the massacre. Now he was leading the largest human fleet ever assembled. Captains, he began, in 6 hours, we will jump to the Vorthak system. Our mission is simple. We will show them what happens when they murder diplomats under a flag of truce. Ji-un listened as the Admiral explained the plan. It wasn't just about winning a battle. It was about sending a message that would echo through the galaxy for centuries. Some of you commanded exploration ships a month ago, the Admiral continued. Some of you were cargo haulers or passenger liners. None of that matters now. Today, you are all warriors in humanity's cause. The screen went dark. Ji-un looked around her bridge. Her crew was watching her, waiting for orders. These people had signed up to explore the universe and make friends with aliens. Now they were about to become part of the largest military operation in human history. You heard the Admiral, she said finally. All stations, prepare for jump to hyperspace. The jump took 4 hours. When they emerged from hyperspace, the Vorthak home system spread out before them like a map of enemy territory. The star was older than Earth's sun, surrounded by 7 planets. The third planet was Vorthak Prime, home to 12 billion aliens, who thought they were the masters of this part of the galaxy. Sensor reading, Captain, her science officer reported. Vorthak Defense Fleet is moving to intercept. Looks like about 300 ships. 300 against 2,000, Ji-un mused. They either think they're much better than us or they're very stupid. Maybe both, someone said, and nervous laughter rippled across the bridge. The Vorthak fleet came at them in a formation that looked like a giant spear. Their ships were fast and heavily armed, designed for quick strikes and rapid withdrawal. It was a tactic that had worked well for centuries against other alien species. But humans had studied Vorthak tactics for 3 years. They had learned from every defeat, analyzed every battle, prepared for this moment. All ships, Admiral Bay's voice came over the communication system. Remember, New Soul. Remember our murdered diplomats. Show them what human fury looks like. The battle began with long-range fire. Vorthak plasma weapons reached out across millions of kilometers, trying to cripple human ships before they could close the distance. But the human fleet didn't try to dodge or retreat. They came straight ahead, accepting losses in exchange for getting close enough to use their own weapons. Ji-un watched her tactical display as ships from both sides died in flashes of light. The peaceful explorer vanished in a ball of fire. The cultural exchange broke in half, its crew lost to the vacuum of space. Ships with names that spoke of humanity's hopes and dreams, destroyed by aliens who saw peace as weakness. Target the Vorthak command ship, Ji-un ordered. All weapons, maximum power. The New Horizon shook as its plasma cannons fired. The beams reached across space and struck the Vorthak flagship, overwhelming its shields and burning through its armor. The alien ship tried to turn away, but more human ships were firing now. Dozens of energy beams converged on the Vorthak command vessel until it exploded in a flash brighter than the local star. The Vorthak fleet began to break apart. Their rigid formations dissolved as individual captains decided they didn't want to die for their supreme warcast's arrogance. Some ships tried to retreat, others surrendered. A few fought to the end, their crews preferring death to defeat. It took 6 hours to destroy or capture the entire Vorthak defense fleet. When it was over, Admiral Bay's voice came over the communications again. All ships move into orbit around Vorthak Prime. We have a message to deliver. The human fleet surrounded the Vorthak homeworld like a metal cloud. 2,000 ships, each one bristling with weapons, each one crewed by beings who had come very far to settle a debt. Commander Junho Shin of the Psychological Warfare Division took over the communication system. His job was to make sure the Vorthak understood exactly what was happening and why. People of Vorthak Prime, his voice boomed across every communication channel on the planet. This is the Terran Federation. Your leaders chose to murder our diplomats under a flag of truce. Your leaders chose war over peace, death over life, hatred over hope. On the planet below, 12 billion Vorthak listened to the human voice speaking their language. Most had never heard a human speak before. They sounded strange, these aliens, soft-voiced and emotional compared to Vorthak speakers. Your military is defeated, Shin continued. Your orbital defenses are destroyed. Your leaders have brought this fate upon you, but we are not like them. We do not make war on civilians. We offer you conditional mercy. The terms were simple and absolute. The Vorthak would surrender completely. Their war criminals would be handed over for trial. Their military would be disbanded. Their children would learn about the massacre at Nexus Prime in school, and they would learn why it was wrong. You will remember, Shin said, his voice carrying across an entire world. What happens when beings choose murder over diplomacy? You will teach your children the names of our dead. You will become our testament to the galaxy that some crimes cannot be forgotten. On the planet's surface, Supreme Warcast Thekmor listened to the human demands from his bunker deep underground. He had been so sure of victory just days ago. The soft flesh were weak, emotional creatures who couldn't match Vorthak's strength. But the burning wrecks of his fleet told a different story. The humans hadn't just defeated the Vorthak. They had crushed them so completely that resistance was impossible. A aide approached him carefully. Supreme Warcast, the planetary government is asking for permission to surrender. Thekmor looked at the tactical displays showing human ships in orbit. So many ships. Where had they all come from? How had the soft flesh built such a massive fleet so quickly? He thought about the murders at Nexus Prime. It had seemed like such a good idea at the time. Kill the human diplomats, show the galaxy that the Vorthak were still strong, force the soft flesh to accept Vorthak terms or face destruction. Instead, he had awakened something that should have been left sleeping. The humans had shown their true nature, and it was nothing like what the Vorthak had expected. Tell the government they may surrender, Thekmor said quietly. Tell them the Supreme Warcast takes full responsibility for what has happened. Above, the planet Captain Ji-Un Kang watched the surrender broadcast begin. Cities across Vorthak Prime were laying down their weapons and raising white flags. It was over. But as she looked at the tactical display showing human fleets moving toward other Vorthak worlds, she realized it wasn't really over. It was just beginning. Humanity had found its voice in the galaxy, and that voice was singing a song of consequences. 2 years had passed since the massacre at Nexus Prime. Fleet Admiral Tae-Young Bay stood in what had once been the Galactic Council chambers, now transformed into something very different. The walls were covered with names written in dozens of languages. Human names, alien names, all the people who had died in the war that could have been prevented. The chamber was quieter now. The old council had been dissolved, its members scattered across the galaxy. Some species had fled to distant systems. Others had sent new ambassadors, eager to prove they had nothing to do with the Vorthak's crimes. Admiral, his aide said quietly, President Choi is ready to address the new assembly. Bay nodded. The new Galactic Assembly was very different from the old council. For one thing, humans had the final vote on all matters of war and peace. For another, every member species had signed agreements that made certain crimes punishable by complete isolation from galactic civilization. The main change, though, was simpler. No one forgot anymore. No one pretended that words didn't have consequences. President Hyejin Choi stepped up to the speaker's platform. She looked older than she had 2 years ago. The war had aged everyone but leaders most of all. She carried the weight of every decision, every battle, every life lost in humanity's campaign of justice. Members of the assembly, she began. We gather today not to celebrate victory, but to remember the price of peace. She gestured to the names on the walls around them. Ambassador So Young Park came here seeking justice through words. Admiral Dae-ho Kim came here hoping to end a war. General Woo Jin Lee came here believing that beings of goodwill could find common ground. Her voice grew stronger. They were murdered for those beliefs, killed by beings who thought mercy was weakness and diplomacy was surrender. In the Vorthak section of the assembly, the new representatives sat quietly. They were different from Thekmor and his followers. Younger, educated in the new schools where human history was taught alongside Vorthak traditions. They had grown up learning about the massacre at Nexus Prime and its consequences. One of them, a female named Veltara, had written her doctoral thesis on the failure of the old Vorthak leadership. Her work was required reading in universities across the galaxy now. The galaxy learned a lesson in those dark days. President Choi continued. It learned that humanity values peace, but we are very, very good at war. It learned that we prefer justice to vengeance, but we will accept vengeance if justice is denied. Dr. Min Seoko sat in the observers section taking notes. She had been documenting the changes in galactic civilization since the war ended. Her research showed something that surprised even her. Humanity hadn't become more violent. They had become more focused. Other species had learned to respect human diplomatic missions. Trade disputes that might have led to shooting before were now settled through careful negotiation. The memory of what happened to the Vorthak Empire made everyone more polite. We have established new laws, President Choi said, and new consequences for breaking them. Any species that commits genocide will face complete isolation until full reparations are made. Any species that murders diplomats will face the combined military might of every assembly member. The enforcement mechanism was elegant in its simplicity. Humanity would remember, and humanity would respond. Other species might forget old grudges, but humans had proven they could carry anger across years and light years without losing focus. Some have called these laws harsh, the president continued. Some say they give too much power to one species. To them I say this. We tried the gentle way. We came to you in peace, seeking justice through words rather than weapons. You taught us that some beings only understand force. Ambassador Yuri Lim had been So Young Park's student once. Now she held the same position her teacher had died trying to fill. She watched the faces of the assembly members as President Choi spoke. Fear, respect, understanding. No one wanted to test human resolve again. We have kept our promise, President Choi said. We have shown you our fury and you will never forget the sound of its echo. But we have also shown you our mercy. The Vorthak Empire still exists. Their people live and work and raise children. They do so under our protection now, safe from those who would punish them for their leaders' crimes. It was true. Human ships patrolled Vorthak space now, but they protected as much as they watched. When other species had tried to take advantage, a Vorthak weakness after the war, human fleets had stopped them. The message was clear. Humanity would enforce its own justice, not allow others to seek revenge. The memorial here serves a purpose, President Choi concluded, gesturing to the names on the walls. It reminds us all that words have power, that promises matter, that some debts are paid in eternal remembrance. She paused, looking around the chamber. We hope we never need to teach this lesson again. The session ended with the traditional moment of silence for the dead. In the quiet, Yuri thought about her teacher's last words. So Young had spoken of honoring the dead through peace, not war. Perhaps she would be proud of what had grown from her sacrifice. After the assembly adjourned, Yuri walked through the station's memorial garden. It had been built where the old Vorthak delegation quarters used to be. Flowers, from a dozen worlds, grew there now, tended by volunteers from every species in the assembly. A young Vorthak was working among the flowers, carefully pruning a bush that bore blooms from Earth. His name was Tokvar, and he was studying to become a diplomat. His thesis was about the importance of keeping promises. Ambassador Lim, he said, looking up from his work, How did the session go? Well, Yuri replied. President Choi spoke about remembering the past while building the future. Tokvar nodded. My grandmother was alive during the war. She says the old leaders forgot that other species could feel pain. They thought strength meant never showing mercy. What do you think strength means? Yuri asked. The young Vorthak considered the question while he worked. I think strength means keeping your word, even when it's hard, even when it costs. You something, Yuri smiled. Perhaps the galaxy was learning after all. 50 years later, Professor Dong Hyun Jang stood before a classroom full of students from a dozen different species. Humans, Vorthak, Zelani, Marathi, and others sat together, studying the history of their shared galaxy. Who can tell me why the period after the Nexus Prime massacre is called the Long Peace? He asked. A young human raised her hand. Because no major war has been fought between species since then. Correct. And why is that? A Vorthak student answered. Because everyone learned what happens when you break faith with humanity. Professor, Jang nodded. The massacre at Nexus Prime changed everything. It showed the galaxy that humans could be pushed too far. More importantly, it showed that humans never forget. He activated a holographic display showing the memorial at Nexus Prime. The name still glowed on the walls, readable in every language spoken in the assembly. Some species learn from their mistakes, he said. Others learn from watching what happens to those who make mistakes. The Vorthak Empire learned both lessons. They made the mistake, and they lived with the consequences. A young Zelani student asked, Professor, do you think the peace will last? Jang looked around the classroom at faces from across the galaxy. Young beings who had grown up learning about diplomacy and consequences, about the importance of keeping promises and honoring agreements. I think, he said finally, that as long as beings remember the lesson of Nexus Prime, peace has a chance. The memorial there isn't just about the past, it's about the future. It reminds us all that words have power and that some echoes never fade. Outside the classroom windows, ships from a dozen species moved through space together, carrying goods and messages and dreams of a better tomorrow. The galaxy had learned to speak more carefully now, to listen more closely, to remember that behind every species were individuals who could feel pain and loss and hope. The echo of human fury still rang through the stars, but it was joined now by other sounds. Laughter, music, the gentle hum of civilizations working together instead of against each other. Ambassador So Young Park would have been proud.